I'm going to tell you about our EMNLP 2024 main paper with the title What's Mine Becomes Yours, Detecting Context-Dependent Paraphrases in News Interview Dialogues. And paraphrases in NLP so far have been a huge topic. So, for example, we have a lot of work creating paraphrase corpora and on paraphrase detection. Also, paraphrases have been used a lot in LLM benchmarks. So, why then is paraphrasing still interesting? Well, one of the reasons is that we want to look at paraphrases in dialogue. So, when one speaker paraphrases the other. We know paraphrasing in dialogue is an interesting signal because paraphrasing can, for example, encourage the other speaker to elaborate, can help de-escalate conflict situations, and increase the perceived response quality of humans as well as dialogue systems. So, adding work in NLP on paraphrasing in dialogue could help analyze and compare conversations in general, but it could also help to improve dialogue systems as well as add benchmarks for LLMs with context-dependent settings. Alright, so maybe this is interesting, but possibly we can already just do it, right? Because there's been a lot of work on paraphrases, and we just add the dialogue setting. Okay, assume you have this exchange here. Someone saying, it will be the 30th year that this is offered in round-the-world transmission, and it will be my 20th time doing it as a television commentator. And then the other person replying, yes, you've been doing this for a while now. So if I ask you, is this a paraphrase? You might say, maybe there is one, but where? So this is already the first difficulty. In NLP, we usually have two complete sentences and ask, are these two paraphrases of each other? But now having something like complete turns in dialogue, it's more tricky. For now, let's just assume we have this solved. So we have some oracle that gives us highlights of the relevant text spans. Then I can ask you again, is this a paraphrase? And you might say, no, because doing something 20 times and doing something for a while are not exactly equivalent, right? I might take 20 steps, but that doesn't mean I have been walking for a long time. Okay, so let me take a step back here, because this is actually an important challenge that other works also come across. So the typical assumption is that paraphrases are equivalent in meaning. Let's look at the two sentences here. The school said that their buses seat 40 students each, and the school is saying that their buses might accommodate 40 students each. These are not equivalent, right? You have differences in tense, and saying something seats and something might accommodate are not the same. But still, these kind of sentences would be considered paraphrases in most NLP paraphrase corpora. And that is because insisting on this complete equivalence would typically lead to sentences that are practically identical at string level. Alright, so what is a difficulty in paraphrase work is that it is tricky to pinpoint exactly what leniency we want to show when it comes to the meaning equivalence. And this can lead to quite some disagreement in annotation, even more so in context-dependent settings like dialogue. So let's assume again that we have solved this and we have a paraphrase definition close to two texts that are at least approximately equivalent in meaning for a given situation. And then my 20th time and doing it for a while here, when you look at more of the conversation, doing the thing 20 times here means doing it for 20 years, and that is quite a while. And then we would expect this kind of pair to be classified as a context-dependent paraphrase. And there's all these kinds of situational things happening here, where also the title of our paper comes from. So, what's mine becomes yours across speaker turns. Alright, so I wanted to know, with all the work that has been done in NLP, can we just apply models that have been used before? The answer is, at this point, to you maybe unsurprisingly, no. Because these models have not been trained on the dialogue context and will check if the sentences are equivalent for all contexts. And having this shift between me and you would already be a contradiction to that. So paraphrases in NLP are typically looked at on a context-independent level. And what does that mean? Well, we have some work to do. And here, this is our approach, and you can already see that this includes some annotation work for the new dialogue setting. And first, we started with an idea of what a paraphrase should be in the dialogue setting. Then we gave some examples to annotators, then got examples where people disagreed, then updated our definition, and so on. So we have this kind of iterative process and use these examples later to explain to annotators the nuances in a kind of example-centric training, out of which we get some trained annotators. And the training we came up with is online as well, if you want to have a look at that. Okay, then we need a data set for people to actually do the annotation on, and we use the NPR and CNN News Interviews data set, because we expect there to be more paraphrases present than in other data sets. Right, so then we had 120 annotators who annotated about 600 turns from NPR and CNN interviews, which led to about 5,500 annotations. Alright, we could already be relatively sure that these annotations were of good quality, because we did develop training here iteratively, and we added comprehension and attention checks, and recruited more annotators when there was disagreement in the initial batch of annotations to make sure we get good overall annotations. In the end, we got an agreement of about 0.2, which is actually not great. So let's look at an example where people disagree a lot. In this example here, the first speaker says maybe the money will help, and the second speaker says it can't hurt, let's put it that way. And there's two ways you can interpret this. You can say, well, the person says maybe the money will help, and the second speaker agrees. Yes, actually, the money will help. It can't hurt. Let's put it that way. So there's that first interpretation. But you can also say, no, actually, the money will not help, but at least it can't hurt either. And depending on which interpretation you go for, you might say it is a paraphrase or it is not. Both are reasonable. And when we go through the annotations like this, we get about 90% of annotations that are at least plausible. And this kind of variation here doesn't necessarily mean that the annotations are bad. Instead, we want to argue that this agreement score here is more an indicator of difficulty and the inherent variation that are both part of the task. Alright, so last step is that we do some modeling. So we have this data set now that we can do in-context learning with. For that we need a prompt, which we model as closely as possible to this example-centric training that we gave annotators. We have some results to show here. So we have a classification task as well as a highlighting task. In the beginning I told you there's this difficulty to know where exactly the potential paraphrase is. So we also asked the models to give us the exact words that are part of the paraphrase. For both scores here, higher means better. What we see is that the bigger language models perform better. However, we get a rather high number of hallucinations. This means that from the generated reply, we can't easily extract the actual highlights the model is providing. This led us to try a different model, which is a token classifier that can't have that problem because it can only highlight what's actually there in the text. Here we used DeBerta Large. We got a worse classification score, but no highlighting errors. So in summary, I told you that paraphrases in NLP are a big topic, but they tend to be on sentence level, whereas we look at them on actual word level. People looked at paraphrases mostly in the context-independent setting. We look at the context-dependent setting of dialogues. Also, people have struggled with label variation before, and we kind of accept that as a given and anticipate it. And for the variation that we don't want in there, we use example-centric training of annotators to show them, well, this is the kind of thing we don't want you to annotate. And then also we ask more people to annotate if it becomes necessary. What I leave you with is a link to our dataset. Here in the running example, 20 out of 20 people said this is a paraphrase. GPT-4 thought so too, and the DeBerta classifier as well. Feel free to check out our paper and talk to us for details and future work. Thanks.